I think it's probably still your best bet if you ever find yourself faced with a phytosaur is to serpentine.
Zigzag.
Imagine basically a giant salamander with a big mouth full of sharp teeth that most likely was kind of lurking at the bottom of ponds and streams.
We have Emily and Helen. And Emily and Helen, where are you?
We are currently in Virginia. We are at Virginia Tech, a university there.
So we find a huge variety of animals. These are just some of the ones that we find the most, or ones that are really exciting to find. We've got metoposaurs, phytosaurs, aidosaurs, and tanystrophiids, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth later. But some of the other ones that we want to highlight are the coelacanth, which is a lobe-finned fish, which today is found only in the ocean. I think there's only 2 species of it today.
Yeah, there's 2 species, and they're deep ocean dwellers.
Yeah, but in the history of the Earth, there were far more species found in lots of different habitats. So the ones that we have from petrified forests were freshwater coelacanths, and they're especially exciting animals because since they're lobe-finned fish, they're actually precursors kind of to the first tetrapods, because having a fleshy lobe fin eventually allowed them to support themselves on sediment in shallow water, and their ancestors down the line kind of eventually were able to make that transition from ocean to land.
Yeah, so coelacanth is not the thing that evolved into tetrapods, but it was this sort of animal hundreds of millions of years before we find these coelacanths.
Yeah, so we are lobe-finned fish.
So when you say tetrapods, you basically mean things on land?
Yeah, 4-legged animals on land.
Tetra, 4, pod, foot.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then shark.
Yeah, we also get these freshwater sharks called hybodonts. So today we've got a large range of different sharks. This is what their jaws look like. So you can see they've got just rows and rows and rows of teeth. And the thing about sharks is this isn't like properly bone. This is sort of more mineralized cartilage. So the thing that we mostly find from these coelacanths is just teeth. Because they don't have bones to preserve. They've just got cartilage, which is the sort of thing you find in the tip of your nose, in your ears. You can feel it's a lot softer than bone is, and it just does not preserve as well. So we find a lot of teeth, and one of the hybodonts we found a good number of teeth, and we're confident that it is a new species. So I'm working on describing that at the moment. The only thing is, this is going to be the holotype. I promise you there's a tooth in there. Oh, they are so tiny, you pretty much need a microscope to
Wow.
Yeah, it's in there. It's right there, but you can't see it.
So are these sharks really small, or is just that one specimen of tooth small?
They can be a big range of sizes. So this is a pretty darn small one, but they can be a lot bigger as well. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Can you explain, you keep mentioning hybodonts. What is that?
So it's a shark ancestor, basically. It's not considered within the true group of sharks, but it's basically like a really old shark ancestor. Like, you can see it looks pretty much like a shark. It's got these fin spines as well that modern sharks don't really have, so these are more mineralized as well, so we sometimes find those. But for all intents and purposes, it's a shark.
Right. And then do you ever find sort of like imprints of the body to know what the shape looked like, or are you just finding like random bits of it?
I'm not aware of any hybodonts, but I'm also not like a proper expert on sharks. I know we do occasionally find like cartilage from sharks.
Not at the site where we
No, not at the site where we dig. There's nothing.
That's mainly teeth that you're doing it from.
Yeah.
So the holotype is from a tooth?
Yes, it's very common with sharks for that to be the case.
So just for our friends that don't know what a holotype is, can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so a holotype it's usually the first described specimen, pretty much always, in fact, and it's essentially the specimen that all other specimens that you might find later are compared to. So if they have a lot of shared features, you can go, these are the same because it matches the holotype.
That's really cool. And you got all that from a tooth?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky, but yeah, had a big debate on what genus to put it in. So we have like species of animal, and then sort of one level up from that is genus, because there's a couple that are similar, and it's a big old mess in what is genuinely the case at the moment. So maybe we can help figure that out a bit.
Very cool. And then that big giant fossil that you showed us from the previous slide was a phytosaur. So it was that big crocodile thing that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got more on him coming right up.
Yeah.
It's like kind of a fun nose. It kind of looks like a spoon.
Yes.
Yes. The sort of like the most obvious difference between phytosaurs and crocodilians is the position of the nostrils. So on our phytosaur, it's got nostrils up here by its eyes. On our crocodile skull, the nose is all the way down at the end of the what we call the rostrum.
Yeah.
And one last cool thing that we find very rarely, but when we do find it's cool, are these animals called lagurpatids. And these are thought to be pterosaur ancestors. So the big flying reptiles, they've got like the skin, wings, fuzzy bodies and things. Not dinosaurs like a lot of people think they are.
Yeah, so a little bit more on the thing that we find most in the field, the metoposaur. This is a type of temnospondyl, which essentially is like an amphibian. So imagine basically a giant salamander with a big mouth full of sharp teeth that most likely was kind of lurking at the bottom of ponds and streams, ready to open its big mouth up and snap up some fish. It has lots of these very sharp teeth lining a huge rim of a mouth, which often is, we call them the toilet seat heads. And in fact, one of our lab mates 3D printed an actual like fossil, like this is exactly what one looked like, to be a toilet seat cover.
He's currently working on how to sort of like seal it so it's hygienic, but
that is fantastic. And is that basically life-sized?
Yeah.
The actual, so that's how big this salamander was.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a big boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, another really, really cool one is a Tanystropheus. So this was an animal. It's a parareptile. So it's a type of reptile. It's not like a lizard. It's not quite an archosaur, which is the group that it includes crocodiles and dinosaurs, as well as birds. But it was super interesting because it has a giant neck. Its neck is basically as long as the entire rest of its body put together. So if you know those big sauropods like Brontosaurus, it had a long neck like that, but was nowhere near as large and was likely somewhat semi-aquatic.
So these are bigger than like apatosaurs? Is that what you just said?
No.
Oh.
Much smaller.
Yeah. Another cool thing about them is that keep going backwards, sorry. They're pretty cool because a recent study done by some German scientists, I believe, they found bite marks in the fossils on the neck in instances where they're just finding the head and neck. So they think that this long neck was actually a weak point for these animals that was vulnerable to attack. So many of these Tanystrophiids were actually getting decapitated, it seems.
Oh no, something would like just bite the neck and bite the head off. Oh man. So okay, so what we're looking at in this in the fossil that you're showing us is the head and neck. So so the head is only 5 centimeters.
Yeah, and this is just a portion of the neck. And you can see the vertebrae are super elongated.
Oh.
Sometimes animals add more vertebrae to make their neck longer, but this guy was just stretching each one out.
Wow.
Dang.
That is
they do get bigger than this one, but nowhere near a sauropod size.
Yeah, maybe.
So they're just like dog-sized.
Yeah, they can be a few meters.
Dog to horse, maybe.
Oh.
Not a horse,
yeah,
that sort of length.
Slender.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's the phytosaur.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
Kind of the star of the Triassic.
yeah, these are the sort of big predators. They're thought to have a similar lifestyle to crocodiles today, crocodilians today, being sort of semi-aquatic, probably like sort of ambush predators coming out of the water, like we can see in this one here. This is from the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science. Yes, it is. And you can see we've got a big old phytosaur here attacking this poor Placerius, which are always just depicted as just cannon fodder in Triassic reconstructions.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. Oh, yes. Yeah, we actually find a lot of their teeth. So I've got one here. This is sort of like maybe like a medium-sized tooth. And you can see they're like really sharp and pointy. They come in different shapes. This one is one towards the front of the mouth. I don't know if you can see, but it's got like these serrations on the edge as well, making it really good for cutting through flesh as well. And this is one from my research. I've scanned this one, so I'm going to use it later on in my research.
so they're I mean, I would not want to get bitten by one of those.
Like a mouthful of teeth that are this big. It's crazy. Like,
Oh, they get bigger too.
oh.
And that's not even the two front teeth, the two long ones in the front, right? That's like just one of the regular teeth.
Sort of from like this sort of
Right,
area.
right.
Yeah, but you can see they have these really like fang-like teeth at the front that are really, really big. And the teeth at the back are more sort of that sort of shape, rather than like pointy and long like this one.
So cool.
And it's really cool because they look very, very similar to modern crocodiles and alligators, but they actually both came from an ancestor that looked more like a dog dino, kind of. So it had more of like a upright sort of frame, less of a long snout. But independently, these two animals evolved very, very similar body plans. And in this photo on the left here, you can see a huge phytosaur skull compared to a kind of small alligator skull. So they got quite big.
Wow. So the smaller one is an alligator.
Yeah.
Yeah, that phytosaur is enormous.
Yeah. So in that picture, we're looking at the roof of the mouth. So this is the palate.
Yeah.
Upside down.
I have a friend who's been taught how to run away from crocodiles and alligators or one or the other, and to run like this. And that probably wouldn't have worked with this predator, would it? Because they're so large, they could just get you like. Oh,
Yeah. I think it's probably still your best bet if you ever find yourself faced with a phytosaur is to serpentine.
Zigzag.
So now we're on to the best animals, which are atosaurs. So I do a fair bit of work on these guys. We actually have a reconstruction of the skull of one of them here. These are thought to have been herbivores traditionally. It's probably a little bit more complicated than that. Probably some of the more omnivores. There's even one that has pretty obviously carnivorous teeth. So they had a wide range of different lifestyles and habitats. But they're these big old terrestrial, heavily armored crocodile-like animals. But they also have this very, very cute snoot, which is sort of upturned. And one of the hypotheses for how that would have been used is sort of digging through the dirt for like roots and tubers and also possibly like insects and grubs. But we find a lot of their armor plates, what we call osteoderms. So when we find them, they look like this. This is an osteoderm from the side of the animal, which you can sort of tell it's got this like angle underneath where it goes like that. It's coming on the side, and it's got this more square shape and a boss rather than being much longer. But we find a lot of these, and they're very useful for something that we call biostratigraphy, which is a fancy way of saying we can tell how old something is relatively based on the animals that we find in there.
kind of like a dragon.
Yeah, they are. They're super cool. They sort of range in size from like a bit under a meter up to 6 meters as a possible maximum for Desmatasuchus, which is this one with the big old shoulder spikes that we have here.
So they don't all have that giant spikes.
No, they don't all have those. They're all pretty armored. And
Wow.
also there is another cool animal we find a lot of in petrified forest called Revoltosaurus. We find a lot of its teeth, and it was originally only known from teeth, and it was originally thought to be a dinosaur. But when they found the rest of it, this is a cast of the skull of the first sort of full one that they found. They realized that's not a dinosaur. That's much more closely related to crocodiles. Look, teeth, they're also armored like an atasaur. So the conclusion they came to is that these are essentially like atasaur ancestors or along that sort of line, which is really cool because we're getting a much better picture of where these guys come from. They didn't just come fully formed.
So you were talking about the biostratigraphy with the Aidosaurs. Were they living at the same time as the Phytosaurs?
Yes, so phytosaurs are also useful for biostratigraphy because we find just so many of them, and they also have osteoderms, so there's armor plates. They look a lot.
Is maybe one of the reasons why they have such big plates and spikes and armors because they don't want to get eaten by the Phytosaurs?
I reckon, yeah, that's a pretty good assessment of it. Yeah, growing with big teeth at this sort of time, so being armored is definitely an advantage.
Got it.
Essentially, we spend all this work trying to get the fossils out of the field, and then we take them back, and it takes a lot more work, years of work, to prep them so that they can be studied. But once we get them into a state where we can use them, there's a huge variety of different ways that we research them. So here we've got our lab mate Erica taking some photographs of one to use for measurement. In this bottom photo, I'm working with CT data. So if you've ever gotten a CAT scan, is that what it's called when it's on human?
Yeah, usually, yeah.
Essentially they use the same sorts of machines on fossils so that we can see inside of a jaw, or if you have a bunch of fossils that are still in a rock, you can put that whole rock into a CT scanner and then go into special programs to segment out the fossils and look at them in 3 dimensions, which is really, really cool. And then here we've got Emily doing a surface scan of a fossil to create a 3D reconstruction of it that you can manipulate on a computer and look at that exterior surface really, really well.
Yeah, would you believe it's an atasaur? Yeah, this one's really cool. We're using it for biomechanical analysis, which is basically like seeing how it was moving and how it was walking. So we want to make a complete reconstruction of an atasaur with these scans, model on the computer, which we can then put into a program which allows us to add muscles and make it move, which is really, really
wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, my research at the moment is more using teeth to identify ancient reptiles. So I'm doing a lot of scanning, both CT and surface scanning. So the one that's rotating currently is a lovely surface scan. It's got the color nicely on it. Because I want to get these tooth crown models, so the top of your tooth that shows out from the gum, which we can then use to compare the similarities and differences between these animals. And so we've got a plot here. Basically, the closer they are together, the more similar they are, the further apart, the more different they are. And we get this big old cluster here, which is largely made up of atasaurs. So if we find an isolated tooth in the field, it's quite probable that if it's an atasaur, it will end up in this cluster here. So this can help us to better identify these, because while we find lots and lots of osteoderms of atasaurs, we basically never find their teeth, which is really weird because they're archosaurs. They are replacing these teeth constantly throughout life. But it may just be that they're not completely that distinctive, and so they're just not being identified as atasaur teeth. So this is hopefully going to help fix that a little bit.
So basically what you're saying is that, yes, you probably are finding them. You just don't know that that's what it is.
Yeah, because it's very, very odd that we're finding osteoderms. We're finding a lot of other teeth, but none of them seem to be atasaurs. So that's weird.
Right.
Gosh.
Yeah, and the project that I'm currently working on is this very, very tiny posterior or back portion of a dunnery. So here on a modern lizard, you can see the dunnery in purple. So essentially it's just this back chunk right here. of an animal that we don't really know what it is. This came from a location called the Green Layer, which is where we all went together to look for fossils. But what's really unique here is that on this tiny fossil, we have grooved teeth. And so with reptiles, if you have grooves on a teeth, it's a very good indication that the animal used venom. So like in our modern snakes, like here we have a model of a viper skull. Their teeth have these very, very deep grooves that have become completely enclosed, creating a canal for which venom can flow through to be injected into prey. And in animals like Gila monsters and varanids, the delivery mechanism is a little bit different. Varanids don't have the grooves, but Gila monsters have a very deep groove on one side of the tooth for injecting venom into prey. And this animal has grooves on both sides of the teeth. So we're seeing a different mechanism of venom delivery that's not known in any modern animals. So it's very exciting to be able to identify a feeding strategy in a fossil when we don't even really know what type of animal this fossil is.
Cool. So what it sounds like is you do a lot of comparing these things that you find and don't know about with modern animals that you do know a lot of stuff about, and then kind of saying, well, if we see it now, it's probably a similar structure or reason or whatever.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times what we hear as paleontologists and say is the past informs the present and the present informs the past. Everything that we see today, we want to learn from to help us understand the past, and any patterns or things that we can identify in the past, especially related to ecosystem change and climate, we want to be able to apply to our modern ecosystems to help us better understand them.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't find them anymore, like on this one that you're saying there's grooves on both sides of the teeth, but you don't find them anymore today, I mean, why? Is it because like it was a bad method and so that's why animals decided not to do that anymore?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Because it's not, they don't really get to decide whether they get to do it or not, but
yeah. At one point, this was definitely advantageous because we have this animal that had it.
And we actually have two more animals also from the Triassic period that show a like dual-sided groove tactic for envenomation. But we don't have any of those today.
Yeah, that's so weird.
Yeah, and the mechanism of delivery that we see in snakes has been basically conserved exactly the same way that it was found in their first fossils. So it seems that they evolved it once and said, we don't need to mess with this strategy anymore, and just kept going with that since it first.
Yeah, but we don't find all these animals today because usually because the environment changed and they weren't able to adapt to this new environment quickly enough. So it's likely that it probably wasn't the venom that was the bad move, but like it may have been that they were a lot slower than other animals. Right. They might have had a less efficient breathing system, like things like that. Their physiology just wasn't up for this changing environment that it lived in.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah.
Are there any environments now on Earth that are similar to the environments that from back then of where you're finding these things? Like what kind of place has?
Probably like swampy places are quite similar to this environment.
Like subtropical.
Yeah.
Lots
in those places today, do you find any animals that look similar to these?
Well, we've got the crocodiles in swampy environments.
Yeah.
You also see, I always think of an armadillo as like a smaller equivalent.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things doing similar things to the big old reptiles that we see in the Triassic, but they're just different groups of animals. So today, mammals are pretty prolific. So they do a lot of things that we see ancient things doing, like getting really big. So elephants are quite often used as comparisons for the larger dinosaurs, even though they're completely different groups of animal. They have a sort of more similar body structure than any reptile alive today.
And like a rhinoceros, a lot like a triceratops.
Cool. Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah. And then just as a last thing, we wanted to talk a little bit about if any students want to learn more about these animals, there are plethora of resources on the web that they can use. The first of which is a great website called Sketchfab. And this is a website in which people can upload 3D models of different animals. So like what Emily showed on her slide, you can manipulate these models in 3 dimensions and look at it from all sorts of angles. A lot of them have labeled bones, so you can learn about the anatomy of the animal. You can also look at your local library for different books on Earth history, and libraries can loan from other places, or you can use apps such as like Libby to get library books remotely on your device. There's lots of great resources for learning in that way.
Another cool thing, obviously museums are great, but recently, and especially since the beginning of COVID, a lot of museums have made these sort of virtual museum programs. So you can go onto their website or search such and such museum virtual tour, and you can basically walk around the galleries, look at exhibits as if you were there, but you don't need to leave your sofa or your bed. So it's great. You can go anywhere in the world, pretty much.
It's so cool.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Thank y'all. This was such a great presentation, and I learned so much.
I love that. I love the fact that in a lot of the pictures that we were looking at and even talking to you two, there's a lot of women paleontologists.
It's a changing field.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a lot of us in the field this year. So this is our VT crew, picture of us at the site where another very famous paleontologist from the early 1900s, late 1800s, called Annie Alexander. She did a lot of expeditions in petrified forest, and this is the site of one of her camps. So we all had to get a picture there.
And she's a big part of why Petrified Forest National Park exists today. So we have her to thank.
Yes, yes. Another fantastic female paleontologist. Well, thank you so much for your time. We learned so much about paleontology and about the pre-dinosaurs that you guys were talking about in the Triassic.
And just so much about women in STEM and just everything and all the hard work that goes into it. You know, there's no way we would have known how much you use that glue or toilet paper. So thanks so much for sharing your toolbox too. That was fascinating.
Exactly. So thank you. And thank you everyone who is out there watching, and we will see you later.
Bye.